This is my audience. This is Allie with Ellie, Alex, Zoe. This is Mike, Honey, and Sophia.
To charge or not to charge? According to TransUnion, the average credit card debt per American in July of 2025 was $6,492. Fortunately, I am on the wrong side of that average. Too many, myself included, got a credit card without knowing how to pay it. So let's fix that. I will be covering the key features of having a credit card, moving past the denial of overspending, and how to achieve financial freedom. Let's start with the key features. For this, you will need to know what is your credit card limit, your credit card balance, your APR, and your minimum payment. If you like, take a moment to pause so that you can get this information and we can do the math together. With this, we'll be able to calculate our credit card utilization rate and what is our monthly interest rate. To help visualize the math to get these features, I will be using my Atmos credit card, which has a current balance of $1,045, a credit limit of $2,200, an APR of 24.99%, and my minimum payment is $36. Now, let's bring out the calculators to do a little math. First off, to calculate our credit card utilization rate, you need to take your credit card balance, which in my case is the $1,045, and divide that by the credit card limit, which is $2,200. This gives us a total of 0.475, rounding it up to 48%. Ideally, you would like your credit card utilization rate to be under 10%. It's considered good if your credit card utilization rate is under 30. It is okay if it's under 50, and anything above that is pretty much the let's fix it category. The next feature we need to know is what is our monthly interest rate. To get that, we first need to figure out what is our yearly interest rate. So to get that math, we get what is our credit card balance and multiply that by our APR, which gives us our yearly interest rate. In the case of my card, I have a current balance of $1,045, and I multiply that by the 24.99%, which gives me a yearly interest rate of $261.15. That's how much I'm paying the bank just to have the debt I have. Now, I take my yearly interest rate and divide that by 12 months, and that will give me my monthly interest rate. So in my case, I take the $261.15 divided by 12, and that gives me a total of $21.76. Now, going back to my minimum payment of $36, that means that most of my monthly payment that the bank set up is just interest rate. So they've made my once happy purchase this long dreaded fee that seems to never end, because when I make their minimum payment, I'm paying mostly just interest rate. So let's fix that. The next step is overcoming the denial of overspending. Too many of us don't want to deal with our finances because we don't want to change our habits. We want to enjoy our retail therapy and perhaps live in the moment without addressing the consequences of our own debt. Now you may be thinking, silly rabbit, why don't you just take your debt and move it to an interest-free credit card or get a personal loan so that you can fix your issue? But there's a problem. If most of us are in denial about our spending habits, and I took into account how much I made in a month and how much I spent, and I realized the main issue with my debt is me. It's how I'm addressing my finances. So instead of making any major moves, I decided to take an 18-month goal in which I addressed how I was spending my money. I set up my finances to make what I needed my minimum payment to be, and I started spending within my means. Because if I make that quick movement and just shift all of my credit card debt to a zero interest rate card, I'm only building an illusion. Most people will just shift their debt and in a few months realize they've just created another credit card debt that they have to deal with because they never touched into their retail therapy or their habits of overspending. So, now let's figure out what my minimum payment should be. Now this takes a little bit more math. So we have to get the utilization rate, which in my case is the 48%. I've decided from this point, this card, I want to pay it off in 2 years. That means I divide my utilization rate by the 24 months to calculate a utilization monthly rate that I want my debt to go down monthly. The way this looks is I take the 48%, I divide it by 24, and this gives me the 2%. In order for me to achieve my goal of paying off this credit card in 2 years, I need to make that debt go down 2% monthly. So what does that look like? I would take my credit card balance, which in my case is the $1,045, and I multiply that with the 2% rate, and that gives me my monthly payment, which is $20.90. But that's just the actual debt. The bank still needs to make their money, so I need to include my monthly interest rate as well. So I get my monthly payment, which is that $20.90, and I add my monthly interest rate. That's actually what my minimum payment needs to be. So in this case, for this card, I need to pay $42.66. This will have me achieve my goal. If I pay this monthly, if I can do more, great. But this is the actual minimum payment I need to do, plus whatever purchases I make that previous month. Now, the goal for it is that we need to address achieving our minimum payment, and we need to find the joy not in that quick purchase, but in the joy of understanding our financial needs and necessities. If you achieve your financial literacy to grasp those points, you will find the joy in understanding your finances, and most people that address their finances tend to make better financial choices. So I hope you take the time to calculate your own finances and maybe even set up a rainy day fund. Thank you.
Why is the utilization rate important?
Okay, your utilization rate is directly connected with your credit score. So actually, the lower your utilization rate is, the better your credit score is. Any other questions?
What do you do when you have multiple credit cards?
You should still do the math for each card to find out where the utilization rate comes into play, and then you can do different styles of paying them off. So for example, some people do a snowballing effect where they get the card with the highest APR and attack it aggressively to get it down, and then start paying all of the minimum payments for their cards. And there's people that just set different goals for different cards.
That makes
All right,
sense.
thank you so much.